So, Nico, what are we building today?
Well, I thought the other day, and then of course I had to think of you after I tried for about an hour or so to do this by myself. I thought that I get this newsletter from 1440. That's like a news aggregation type of thing. And there's lots of promotional content in there. So I wanted to figure out if I could grab that email and basically clean it up. Now I can copy the email and put it into, the 4.0 mini, I think is good enough, and clean it up. But I wanted to ask you if we could automate that, like just as a use case example, so I can learn like a simple workflow. This doesn't seem to be too complicated.
Okay, so let me just share my screen. We're gonna open up Make, and all right, cool. So here we are. So I'm just gonna name this Nico's bot. So what you just told me is you want to grab an email and clean it up. When you clean up the email, I would assume that you download the contents of the email and then you only return the plain text, or if there are images, would you also want to return the images themselves as well?
It'd be cool to do the images, but this newsletter actually doesn't have images from what I remember. So it's mostly text-based. And when I tried it,
okay,
I got the LLM to give me just like markdown output that I can easily read, and that's well.
Would you be happy with markdown output?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
so
we probably have to unpack email a little bit, right? I mean, I get the newsletter via email. I get it via email, and so what I was trying was building a forwarding rule to a webhook in Make to basically send the email there from my account. Another version might be to use an RSS feed for this, because this is a newsletter, right? So it's not sure if you have tried either or.
Yeah, you can. There are different alternatives to this. So what we're trying to do now is the black box method, right? We have a starting point and we have a desired output, and within that there is a black box that we're trying to build with Make. This is classic engineering 101. And now our starting point with delivery is an email. So we want to build something. We always want to build something that doesn't require you to change your behavior that much or at all if possible. And we don't want to necessarily overcomplicate it. So my first intuition said, why don't we just grab all the emails and filter somehow within Make, right? And then we would just parse through all the emails. So let me just quickly check if there is an email, if I even have an account here. Okay, so now there's a bunch of folders in here. You don't even need to forward it. You can just create a folder and then manually create the rules. If I'm getting an email from this email address, put it in this folder, and I'm only going to watch the contents of these specific folders. I'm just going to check all mails and mark your message is read when fetched. Yeah, sure. So here is the tricky part, at least for testing, right? I don't want the maximum number of results to be a low amount because I want to be able to at least catch something here. So I'm moving over here, check my emails, and I'm going to quickly select one that I'm getting. Let's see what we have here. Interesting. Okay, so I'm following indie hackers, and I get a lot of indie hackers content. They're pretty bloated usually. So I would want to get, like, there are a bunch of different paragraphs in there. Let me just show it to you, right? So this is a typical indie hacker's email, right? There are a bunch of news pieces in here. There are images. I might want this to be just text. So I'm looking at where I'm getting this. I'm getting this from indiehackers.com. So I would want to find something that I can grab onto here, right? So there's a search phrase. Maybe let's see what happens if I add this into the search phrase, right? And then
you have
what
to
I
go
would
back to the
want
Make.
to do.
But we're still seeing your email.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No,
yeah,
cool.
sorry. So what I'm doing here is I just added indiehackers.com as a search phrase. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but let's see.
Okay.
The other one that I could do is use the sender email address.
All right. So two things. Right. One is, unfortunately, I have this on a non-Gmail account. So I didn't use the Gmail, discard the Gmail module in Make. I had to do something different. But and the other thing is, if you do search or even by sender and you grab 100, then you just do this for testing. I assume you're already looking ahead, and then you're going to narrow this down and only grab the latest one then, so that the workflow doesn't always grab 100 emails and pushes them to the LLM.
It doesn't actually matter if it does grab 100 emails, as long as it remains a low number of operations.
Okay.
So Make charges you based on the number of operations. So I just changed from the Gmail module to the email module, which allows you to use all sorts of different email settings.
Yep.
And let's see. So all emails. And so as you can see, I always get the newsletter from the same email address.
Yep.
So what's an even better way for me to check for these emails is just to use not the recipient, the sender email address here.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's see what happens if I do this. Be here and now. So ideally, I should only get emails that were sent by this person. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to, let's say, September the 1st. I got a bunch of emails from them, right? And let's see what happens now. Okay. So what you're going to see here is sender Channing at Indie Hackers, bundle 2, sender Channing at Indie Hackers. So it didn't actually return all the emails from my email account. It only returned the emails that were sent by this specific person.
Cool.
If the email sender address is persistent, is it persistent for you?
I'm pretty sure it is. Let me double check. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they always send the same one.
What's the newsletter that we're looking at?
It's called 1440 Daily Digest. 1440
1440.
Digest. Yeah, Daily Digest. The domain is join for
this one. Okay, let's just sign.
I also understand why these people are use advertising in their email, but it just as a fun exercise. Let's get rid of the advert.
Okay, so what I got here is I got this Wacom message, and I get daily digest at email.join1440.com. Is this the email you're getting stuff from?
Double check. Daily digest at email, .join.
Okay.
That's it.
So in your case, what you will need to do is just do the same thing, but the sender email address should be that specific.
Right.
Okay. So now that we actually quote the emails, we have a good, nice list of emails. When you look at here in the text content, there is text content, there is HTML content, there are attachments if there are any. Now, we're only focusing on the text bit, right? So here, what I'm going to use is probably this one. And then following up, we can take a look at if we can grab the images. But for now, what I will want to do is I will want to take this field, this long string.
Yeah.
It's pretty long. So I will need to see how long this is. I'm just going to copy this and check in the tokenizer. I'm just going to check how long this is. So it's 8,000 tokens, which is fine. So I can just use OpenAI for this. And I have 2 connections. This is the one. Okay, brilliant. So
you're still showing the tokenizer? Just saying.
Yes. Okay. So now we're going to need to select a model. And I will select O1 mini. I want to see if the amount of tokens we have is going to be sufficient for O1 mini.
O1,
Let's see, OpenAI O1 mini. Yeah. Because O1 mini is actually pretty cheap.
Is it? Okay.
It does use sequential reasoning. It's not really reasoning, but who am I to judge? So we can select from GPT-4o, which is going to charge you 2.5 for 1 million put tokens. You can use GPT-4o mini, which is going to charge you 15 cents for 1 million tokens. That's obviously the most economic one. One preview is just filthy expensive, so
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to need to use that. And then O1 Mini is $3 for 1 million input tokens, which is pretty much comparable to GPT-4o.
Mm-hmm.
And right, so if I have to choose, I either use between GPT-4o or 1 Mini, I will always just go with O1 Mini. However, I want to see if GPT-4o Mini does the job, because if it does, then that's just going to be peanuts, right? Ideally, if you're only doing this for a daily email and just one email, you're not going to be spending a lot of
Mm-hmm.
money on this, right? You're not even going to spend $1 a month. If you plug in all your emails or your newsletters from everywhere, then you might actually spend a lot more tokens. And that's why checking if GPT-4o Mini is going to do the job. But I want to start with O1 Mini first, because I want to see how many tokens it's going to spend. I can estimate, and if it's viable, then why would I want to go further?
Okay, but I did in my preliminary testing. I used the 4.0 Mini, and that
Mm-hmm.
worked. That, I mean, it's a fairly
It worked.
simple job for a large language model. So I think
Yeah.
the most. But what I wanted to ask you is, when you're doing the O1, the O1 Mini, isn't it gonna generate more output tokens? Like, even if it's price comparable to 4.0, isn't just the way how it works, and that it basically branches out a little bit, going to in total generate more tokens, especially on the output side, even if we give it the same input tokens?
Yes. So it charges $3 per 1 million input tokens, and then $12 for 1 million output tokens. And output tokens do include internal reasoning. And
Right.
that's why I want to see,
Okay.
how much will it cost me to do this?
Okay. Okay, we can try. I mean, I'm curious too.
Okay, so we have the text content here, and let's just use something fairly simple, right?
Go back
So
to the
I'm just
make
gonna say,
scenario. Yeah.
yeah. I forgot to share my entire window, and I shared the tab instead, and then just okay.
It's more
So we need to
work.
write a prompt here, and what I'm going to do is I'm gonna keep using the vanilla instructions of GPT. I very rarely do any sort of formal prompting. So it's an assistant. It does what I want it to do. So here is the full text of an email from email. I want you to clean the text and return just the actual content. Remove all intros, outros, ads, sponsored content, and return just the sauce. Right? Okay. And then the sauce. And then I need to also kind of set my expectations for the format. So we said markdown. So your output must be in a markdown format, nothing else added to the text, just the markdown text. I find this last sentence to be very useful. I think we can probably, as these models develop, we can just leave that at some point. But I always just add it here. Okay,
And
I'm being very brutal here.
that's
Yeah, right.
that's preventing it from saying at the end of the email, here's the email cleaned up and removed out of all. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. And also, I'm interested. So we cannot set response formats with O1, and we cannot set the temperature for O1. So we're gonna see what happens. We're gonna check the pricing against this, the number of tokens used, and that's it. So I'm going to go back here and reuse the number of results to 3, and then I'm just gonna run it once. And I need to choose where to start. So emails after a specific date, which is gonna be September 1st, and let's run it once. So now what happens is that it returns 3 bundles to me, right? We got 3 bundles, 3 emails. September 7, September 5, September 3. And it sends it to O1 Mini, and I already got an output here. Result is a simple markdown text, and I can see that it added links as well, So sources are retained, keeps the emojis, keeps all pretty clean. There's a status update. Okay, so I want to see choices. Yeah, I got it here. So we got 8,000 prompt tokens and 1,600 completion tokens, right? So these were the input tokens. These were the output tokens, right?
Okay,
So,
I'm surprised.
so we know that for 1,000,000 tokens, we're going to be charged $12. Round this up here. I'm gonna say we spent 3,000 completion tokens, so that's 3.5 cents. So I'm just gonna say it here. $12 per 1,000,000 times, let's say 3K. That's $0.036. And then we also sent $3 per 1,000,000 tokens, and then also round this up to 9,000 tokens. So $3 per 1,000,000 times 9,000, and that equals to 0.027. So using O1 Mini gives us total cost 0.063 email, right? And if I check the other bundles, let's see what else we have here. Pretty much comparable, so almost the same. This one.
These are still the indie hacker emails, right?
And these are the indie hacker emails, yes.
Okay.
So look at this. This one actually had a lot longer stuff. This is one went AWOL and it used 7,000 tokens.
Mm-hmm.
So, right, that means that this actually became closer to like maybe 10 cents as a cost.
Yeah.
It's not as good as I would want it to be. So now let's try GPT-4o Mini and see the cost. I like to do this every time I do something new because it will give me a pretty good understanding of how scalable something is. Because if I only do this at the small scale, I would rather use a more expensive but better model because I will not spend a lot on it. But if I need to process 1,000 emails a month, I will definitely try to do something simpler.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go back here and select GPT-4o Mini, keep everything the same, except now I'm going to reduce the temperature to 0. I always do that. I always like to build low temperature stuff because it reduces hallucinations. Okay. Now let's see what happens now. Okay. So same thing. We got the 3 bundles, 3 emails, and now I'm supposed to be getting, this should be a lot faster.
I was going to say that, yeah.
Yeah, OpenAI sometimes does that. It's just, especially around this time of the day, it just gets completely out of whack. There you go. Okay, so GPT-4o Mini, prompt tokens, 8,000, completion tokens, less than 2,000. Let's see the message. See, it actually did create the markdown marker here, which I don't really like. It didn't actually use the type of markdown formatting that I would want to see here.
I gotcha. Yeah, I agree.
So yeah,
but that could be.
I will probably.
That's a little bit like luck, right? I mean, you could regenerate it, and maybe it does do it. Unless you specify it in the prompt, I guess it's a coin toss.
Okay, then. Yeah, but here's the thing: what we want is absolute consistency.
Sure.
Right. So we can now check the completion tokens are about less than 2,000. Prompt tokens are about 9,000. So now we have a good understanding of how much does it cost, but we do need to do some more fine tuning on the prompt. Okay, so you must omit characters and any other edit bits. Always use markdown type formatting.
I sometimes call it classic markdown. Yeah. And you could, the hash marks for headings. I think that's a good point. Do you, quick, just practical question. Do you tend to try to avoid negations in prompts? Like generally speaking, instead of telling, like I recently saw someone doing a post saying like, here's my custom ChatGPT instructions. And it had like, don't use, and then it was like 100 different words or something like that. You know, never say this, never use that. And I was thinking, you should more positively prompt, because negative prompting oftentimes means that the the LLM now, you basically inject all of these terms into its context window by saying, don't say,
It doesn't really matter.
No, you don't think so? Okay.
It doesn't really matter. No, we're way past that. That's one of the reasons why I'm very keen on, saying that you shouldn't really bother with learning prompt engineering. You just do trial and error.
Okay.
And one rule I have is that if the prompt becomes very long, that means that I should probably break it down to two stuff. If the only way for me to achieve consistent results is that I create a very long prompt with a lot of restrictions in it, then instead of creating one completion, I just break it down into 2 or 3 completions and create some sort of intermediary completions. A good example for this would be I'm working for this client, the CGM project. When I get a lot of raw data, comments from a community platform, from a person, and then I need to create a testimonial for that person. And first I need to take all the raw comments and create a timeline of events. It's like date what happened, date what happened, date what happened. Then another prompt tells me what the person's problem was prior to joining the community, what their status quo looked like, what their desire was, what was their turning point. So we're looking at like 5 or 6 different prompts. And then when it's done, I use the last one. It's like, hey, here are the 6 intermediary pieces of content. Create a testimonial based on this. But even then, I don't create a testimonial. Actually tell me a background story. Tell me the most powerful quote from the person and tell me the impact. I have the raw data, 6 intermediary steps, and then another 3 intermediary steps. And that's when I get the last result. I probably could have had it done with one prompt only, but it didn't make sense because then it wasn't consistent in formatting. It wasn't consistent in semantics. This way you can achieve higher levels of consistency. For now, so I'm assuming that we can
just to throw this back at you, that I understand this the way you explained it. That would mean in this simple workflow, we could, for example, parse or push the email text content to the first model and simply say, get rid of all of the, or extract the section this, and this, for example, right? Maybe we can even point it to the sections, or always ignore the sponsored content. And then we could have another instance of the large language model. And then we only, for example, do the formatting, because let's just say we want to completely geek out on the formatting. Then we could say, I want this particular type of format. The first section is going to have this name. It's always going to be a heading 2, etc. So because that's getting too complicated, you split it up into 2 separate tasks. Yeah. Yes, I think this is quite magical. I think this is what people are not. There's a huge difference from what you tell me, and it totally makes sense to how the regular user who doesn't do this in Make or it's something similar would just throw everything at the large language model, like maybe like a couple of documents plus a pretty long prompt, and then basically have it do many things in one big task.
Yeah, but that's like it's all about thinking like an engineer, right? Like if you think about this, there are atomic tasks that are being done here. One task is rewrite the content, so omit stuff from the raw body of text. Here is a raw body of text with 10,000 characters, but I only need 5,000. Return to me that 5,000. And then the second task is take this 5,000 characters that only contain what I want and reformat it for me, right? And that's something that you will need a lot of times, because do you want to push this to Notion? You will need a specific type of formatting. Do you want to push this to Airtable or a Google Doc? You will need a specific type of formatting. Yeah. So, and when you need to put this into an interface, you will need to create it in a way that's consistent and also adheres to the formatting requirement. And separating these small little tasks will help you a lot. So in the meantime,
do the modules within Make translate from one scenario to another? Like, or let's just say you build your own format for Notion type of thing. Can you, as a sort of a custom module, can you use that across or even share with other people? How does that work in Make.com? Can you use that across very
So
different scenarios, or do you always have to rebuild it?
you don't necessarily have to rebuild it. So if I export this scenario that was built and you import it into your own make, then all the settings are going to be inherited, right? At first, it's not going to happen. At first, you will need to add your own accounts. But when
Sure.
it does, it actually inherits all the configuration. So when I send this over to you, all you need to do is just set your own email, set your own OpenAI account, and it's done.
Cool.
And it's running. So in the meantime, let's see what happened here. So here is the result. Okay, now it's formatting it the way we want.
Yeah, this is actually better.
Let's see the other one.
That actually looks better than even the as just from a glance than what O1 gave us, because sometimes they go so deep into the hierarchies of the headings. You have like 3 and 4 headings, and I'm like, why don't you just use like, 1 and 2 should suffice, maybe 3.
Yeah.
Levels of hierarchy.
Okay, so I'm happy with the level of consistency here. Let's take a look at token use. So we still did input tokens, roughly 9,000 here. Not this one. Again, about 9,000 here and about 8,000 here. So I'm going to calculate with 9,000. Completion tokens are 1,600 here, and then 1,700, and then 1,000. So I'm going to completion. I'm going to just say 2,000, right? Maybe it goes AWOL a bit and then it gets higher. So I'm going to go back here, GPT-4o mini. Look at that, 0.6 for output, 1 million output, and 0.15 for 1 million input. So 0.15 per 1 million times 9K, and 0.6 per 1 million times 2K. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick check, and I'm going to say 0.15 divided by 1 million times 9,000. So that gives me, and then the other one would be 0.6 divided by 1 million times 2,000. That gives me 0.0012. So now I can calculate that doing this for one email will cost me, total cost is 0.000255 per email, right? So that means that O1 Mini did,
I think you even missed a zero.
Task.
You may have even.
So O1 Mini, where?
I think you dictated yourself another 0 in total cost, but didn't type it. Can you double check what for the total cost? You got 2 zeros.
Okay,
no, it looks correct. No, it looks correct.
It is 2 zeros.
Yeah,
it is
gotcha.
2 zeros. So O1 Mini does the same task for 25 times more, which means that even if this prompt would have been too much, I could have just separated into 2 or 3 intermediary steps and build my own reasoning steps. And even if it generated 3 times as many tokens, even then the cost would have been less than a tenth of this O1 Minis, which is, I wanted to demonstrate this, that just by separating your prompt into multiple sequential prompts, you can actually achieve a higher level of quality that can be on par or comparable to what OpenAI calls reasoning models. And okay, so now what we want to do is we want to push this somewhere. So we can push this to Google Doc, we can push this to Notion,
I would love to get it back, right? My idea was to basically forward the email from my actual email, but then get it back in the cleaned up version.
Okay. I mean, so we can do that. We can do that easily, right? We can just I can just get it for myself. I'm just going to get a subject that says Daily Digest from Indie Hackers. And if I have more emails like that, I could easily do that as well. And then I just say daily digest, and it can collect all those things. And then I just say plain text,
Oh, wait a
and the
sec.
content is here.
Wait a sec. Could you add a variable to the subject? Say, for example, daily digest and then today's date? I guess right. You could, right? Or you could even take maybe the
Yes.
input. You could take the input subject line from the original Indie Hackers email. That would also work, right? Because we have that. We already grabbed that in.
Yeah. So here's what you can do. So you can grab this.
Yeah.
Indie Hackers always uses this what's new thing that I would probably want to get this done, get this out. So I would just say news from Indie Hackers, and then on, and then I just use the where's the today. That's not what I'm
That's
looking
very fun.
for.
Yeah, it's going to be very technical. The date was also something you could get it from Make, but you could also get it from the email. That's a choice, I guess.
Yeah, so current date and time, and it sends it there. Or I can also add it from here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, as you can see, so this is a text string, right? This is a text string. So I'm going to try something here. I should be able to trim, not trim.
We could put in a little parser, right? Something that basically converts from the date string that we
There
get
you
from
go.
the email. We could extract the month and or something like that. They're substrings. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to define, because so the date here would be just a string, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh yeah, it will always change because of the date. So I would need to use a write function for that and just omit the last 6 characters. But I don't know how to do that on Make, so I'm just gonna not do it. But if anybody
Is
knows
it trim?
how to do
Is it trim maybe?
No, because trim just trims the space characters. So yeah,
Sure.
let's see. Okay, so I'm just gonna say on and date,
Okay.
and that's it.
And for the content type, you selected plain text. But since we have Markdown
Yes.
output, if we send it out as HTML, shouldn't it be then even rendered correctly? I would
Maybe.
try that. Could. I mean, I'm not sure,
I'm not
but
sure, but
basically Markdown could be rendered to HTML. We'll see.
yeah, let's see what happens. It's gonna send me 3 emails, obviously.
And 4 emails would basically cost you 1 cent, right?
4 emails would cost me 1 cent. Yes. Why is it being so slow? They've returned all the emails now.
I'm gonna grab a drink.
What happened? Operation timed out. Interesting.
Maybe something to do with the date you selected because it worked so well the first couple of times.
Yeah, it did work so well in the first couple of times. So just where to start. I'm just gonna select October 1st. It times out for some reason. Oh, now it works. Okay, we got it. Okay, so here's how this looks like. Right?
HTML.
So it doesn't, not HTML. So what can we do with this? Well, what we can do with this is we can take the HTML content and have it rewrite into a new HTML content. So I'm going to stop this here. And now we have the markdown format.
Right.
So what I'm going to do is I'm
You
going
would do
to take...
You would do this with the
still-
with the model, or is there maybe even a what's it called, a module in Make that does markdown to HTML?
I don't know.
I haven't tried.
There's HTML to PDF, text parser, there's markdown to HTML. Okay, so we can just do that.
But you said they're gonna charge you. Make is gonna charge you on the actions. So
Yeah, but at this point we're not doing a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what happens before. You know what? I'm just
cool.
I don't know if I. Yeah, the email wasn't changed. So even though it does create a new markdown, a new HTML from this, it's going to still send the output of this module.
Let's stop it then.
This is one of the things about using Make is that sometimes, there you go. So content type HTML. Okay. So sometimes you get into these issues like timing out and being slow, and it's pretty unpredictable. And I haven't really figured out what causes this. My best bet is scalability issues. It is doubling user base every year. Make. Okay. So we received the emails in separate bundles as expected. And now this happened, and now this happened, and boom.
That's pretty neat.
That's what we wanted.
That's a win. Okay, this is pretty cool.
That's a win.
Yep.
Okay. So as we're thinking about this, I'm still a bit bothered by this here. So I just went into ChatGPT and I literally just said, hey, this is what I want. Write me the function for this. Write me the function for me. So this is how I learn to use Make most of the time. Is just aggressively copying and pasting shit. And what I found interestingly is that it seems to be most people are afraid of doing this.
Go back to Make. Sorry, we're still seeing your ChatGPT.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I just went into the subject and just copy pasted what ChatGPT gave me. As you can see, it does reference the field, but it's not filled. So I need to delete and add it back because there's some formatting issues with that. Now I do that again
But that was pretty self-explanatory, right? I mean, it totally made sense how it constructed that little piece of that we added. So we learned something there.
Yes. So I actually need to delete 14 characters because now I understand the formatting. So let's see what happens.
Can you make as a Make question? Can you in Make check for only that piece? Like you just change something. Could you sort of like use the log and instead of running the entire thing, basically just say, I want to see what happens from this module to this module or something like that, right? Just like show.
Yeah, you can. Once it runs, I'm going to show you how you can do it. It's pretty simple. Actually, the only thing that you need to bear in mind is that you will need to manually supply the input field. So for example, the OpenAI module uses the input field from the email. So if I want to manually run this, I need to add in some text myself. Okay. So apparently it tried to do it, but then it actually ended up doing something completely different. The interesting thing for me here is that it actually returned a completely different format from the original ones. So you look at here, this was you look at here, this was a completely different format.
Yeah.
So I need to understand.
That was the ISO format, right? Which is basically sortable, where it starts with the year, then the month, and then it goes into the time and so on. It's strange.
So we would need to format the date here. So instead of just can I use format date? One thing that bothers me a bit is the inconsistency of the date formatting. Why is it inconsistent? I know why it is inconsistent because now I'm using an HTML content type. So it sends me a different format.
You think so? That's the reason?
Yeah. Let's see if I go back to plain text.
Yeah.
Then. Well, actually, I can just show you this here. So I can just click on and say run this module only. And here I would need to add some sort of date here.
Okay.
And and then I can also add whatever content I want to add in here. But I want to figure out what I'm getting from this module. So I'm just interesting how it became a lot slower. Okay, so that's interesting. No, so it did change, even though I did change it back to text.
Yeah, that's not it. That's not the problem, apparently.
Okay, let's see what happens if I try to do this. Let's see if this works. This should probably work. And it just parses the date out of whatever the format is. Okay. So don't mind this one. I forgot to put it back there. And it still returns this ISO format. So this is something that we can play around for a while. But this is the kind of thing that if I actually learned how to use Make properly instead of just trial and erroring my way towards oblivion, I would probably know how to do this.
Yeah.
And I find there are two kinds of people. Go ahead.
Lumberjack approach is you don't read the documentation from completely and then start using make. I mean, honestly, everybody could figure this out, right? I mean, the date format, it's a problem, but either you start reading the make documentation or you dig a little bit deeper. You could probably also, I would oftentimes maybe go even ask Perplexity instead of ChatGPT, just so that maybe has maybe more accurate sources. Because you gotta still figure that 4.0 has a cutoff date October 2023. Right? So I mean, it's fine, but for the most part. But if you use Perplexity, it might dig up somebody's article on wherever that has explained this better.
Yeah, I just want to show this meme because building with Make and any no-code platform does feel like a video game, and this is the lumberjack method.
Yeah,
and then this is the other one that I found to be hilarious. But that's the fun part. Yeah. That's the fun part, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna switch this back to HTML and save it, and then I just export the blueprint and send it off to you on this.
Also, we could also patch this entire problem by just using the subject line from the original email, right? I mean, I'm just saying, like,
of course.
We kind of like built this problem for ourselves because we gave it a different subject line, and then we wanted to add the date to the subject line. There's no necessity just to get it done. We could simply say, God damn it, use the same email subject line that we got for the original email, and you're basically fine.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that I find to be a very good approach. Like, a lot of times you will find yourselves to be limited by your own technical knowledge. But again, find a good enough substitute. It's like, do I really need this to be like that? Or can I just find a simple way of, it's like,
Yeah. And you also have the date, because on the day that the email comes in, if we built this, right, then it would work. There's one more thing about the watch emails module. How do you set this up now to basically run continuously? Because, and is this like a cron job? Is this actually going to run continuously, or is it going to run once a day? How does this work?
Okay. So first, before you actually set this up, you need to figure out what the maximum number of results you want to handle. But basically, you need to decide how often you want this to run. And by default, make scenarios run triggered by time. So here you can select the regular intervals. And if you get a daily digest email every day the same time, the easiest way to set this up is you just set it every day and you set the actual time, maybe, I don't know, 15 minutes, 30 minutes after that happens, right?
Yeah.
And that's it. And then one thing that you can probably also do is, because you send an email to yourself, what you could also do is you could take the original email and then you can refer back to this email UID here. The source folder is your all mail folder. And then you actually move it to like a processed or something. So you don't actually have to read it. It doesn't show up in your inbox. It's archived. So I can just say, right, I can just put it here, I don't know, into blogged. That's the stuff that I just don't need to read. And when that happens,
you could even trash it. I mean, it really depends on your
mark
preference.
Message as read. Yeah. And now when I run this, so I'm just going to say 10 emails, choose where to start, emails from after a specific date or first. I'm going to start running this, and in the hackers. Okay. So what you're going to see here, these are the bunch of stuff that I sent to myself.
Yep.
So I can just delete those because I don't need them. Okay. So I have a couple of emails here. I use the service called Leave Me Alone, which does a somewhat similar thing, but it costs me like $14 a month.
Okay.
So what's going to happen here is it started doing it. So now what's happening is the first email that was processed was one I got from October 2nd. And yeah, that's the one that has been processed. No, this has been moved over to blogged. Yeah. It's already in blogged. And if I refresh again, then you will see that more emails are being sent to blog. The one with leave me alone, it's not relevant because that's different. So it's now processing, and if I go back, ooh, and why is it did something wrong?
Celebrated too early.
I thought we were done. I
Yeah,
thought we were done, and it's not. Oh, interesting. Okay, let me stop this. Hold on.
Go back to the make screen if you can.
Okay, so the content field was empty.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And then if I want to, I can, instead of using move an email, I can just trash it and do the same thing. Use the email UID I got originally, which is from here. Folder is where it is. And then emails from a specific date. Okay, so I take these empty emails, delete them as if nothing happened. So it starts with October 10th. We're going to see what happens. Okay, so now I get it. Now it works. And these emails are also getting deleted from the all mail folder. I could also delete them from the blogged folder. And when it runs through and finishes, should get less emails here. But what you can also see that these are marked red, and these were marked unread before. And now I have all these newsletters that I wanted to do.
Yep.
I want to show you two more things before we finish that might be useful. So one thing is that instead of using email, this is one thing that I want to work on when I have the time. There's this thing called the News API, and I love this thing.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty simple. It's pretty cheap. So you can do 2,000 searches in total per month. You get full access to all available API endpoints. And that means that you can actually create a news search query inside this, generate an API endpoint for that, and then send whatever payload is there to a webhook in Make. And then do the exact same process like you do here, but instead of email, you get the news pieces in here from the webhook. And then you get this exact same thing there. You end up having a markdown formatted email in your inbox, like a daily news digest.
And how would you curate what you're looking for in the News API?
So
you have to do that yourself, or are you saying you're taking the email as a starting point?
Let me show you. I think I will need to register again. Give me 1 second. Okay. So here is where we are. And I think there was a sandbox here. You get an API key. It's not, I can recreate it, but yeah. And then get articles, get events. This is a playground here, but this is how you will want to use the API endpoint. So let's say I'm interested in artificial intelligence, right? Then I can check for specific topics. There is a semantic search type of thing here.
Okay.
And then I can also select, let's say, English language, but I can select all sorts of other languages here as well.
Okay.
And then there are different stuff that I can extract. I'm only interested in the body, and I can generate the code and execute the search. So what I'm doing now, I just executed the search, and you can see that it got me a bunch of stuff like gov.uk. There's a German website, latestly, biotech Spain. Maybe it's getting too much stuff. So let's see if
Sources.
I can.
That's a sources filter, right?
Yeah. So let's see if I can. There's a filter sources by rank, and I want to select top 30% of sources or something, or top 20% of sources, and execute the search again. And now it's getting me Lifehacker, Gizmodo, Investing.com. Okay, this is not bad. I can still play around with how I want this to work. So for example, let's say I'm only interested in stuff that is related to ChatGPT. So I can say artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, and now it's getting me a bunch of other stuff. Now this is getting more interesting. This is more, focused. So what I can do here is I just generated this code. So there is a REST API call here. So all I need to do is, if you'd like to do a GET request, then I just have this one. And okay, so I'm gonna go back here, save, export blueprint. You know what? I'm going to create a new one. Clone Nico's bot news. Keep the states of any new modules. Yes. Okay. And now I'm going to edit it. And instead of this one, I'm just going to do the HTTP make a request. And here is the URL that I got.
Yep.
It's a GET request. So if I run this module, look at this. Let's see what we got. We got a JSON file here, and it contains all the data that we need. So maybe I could, it's a pretty long string. So it contains all the articles that we have here. Maybe I don't want all of them to come in here. So instead of using OpenAI, I'm going to do the most lumberjack thing you can do here and just use Gemini and shove the whole fucking to Gemini 1.5 Pro because it has a long enough context window and like that. And I'll say, I want you to write me a digest of these news items adhering to the BBC Code of Conduct. I like to use that. Here is the rule. I like to use the BBC Code of Conduct because it comes up so often when it comes to how to write journalistic stuff that there's a lot of, you can assume that there's a lot of occurrences of that in the training data.
Okay.
So the digest should contain a coherent daily digest of news pieces geared towards AI enthusiasts. So here's what I'm going to do. Once I get the output, what happened here? That shouldn't happen. We just found us a bug. Okay. So
is there an undo button? Because you duplicated it in some sense.
Yeah, it looks like I duplicated it. Yeah.
That's weird. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it is weird. So what I would want to do here is I would just use the result from here. Here is the full text of a news daily digest. And then I say, I want you to return this, just the actual content, remove all interest, I can just leave that here, right? And then use the email here as well and just daily digest. I'm not going to be bothered with the date formatting now. And I don't need that email thing because that's it. So now if I run this, it will return a bunch of information for me. It will send it off to Gemini. It's going to take a while.
Yeah. Okay. I also had two bonus questions. So while that is running, one is the exercise that we went through was to clean up one specific email. Now, if I were to monitor, I had this use case with one of the executives that I was talking with a while ago. He runs an agency and he wants to keep he has like a bunch of newsletters that he needs to follow. So I was thinking if I actually had, let's just say 12 newsletters, right? And I know that some of, and they're all in that case, AI related or AI industry news related. Now, I don't want too many repetitions. Like if one of the newsletters already says NVIDIA released blah, 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 maybe that's in the other, in 80% of all the newsletters that I'm getting on that day or during that week. So we could also probably throw all of them in and create a meta digest on these already curated sources. And I guess so, right? And also we could we run some type of only make me aware of, and then like a very advanced version of a Google Alerts thing where we basically say, monitor these 15 newsletters. And whenever they mention this type of thing, or when they, especially an LLM should be capable of figuring that out. When some type of topic comes up, then let me know, or put that on top of the email or something and say I could do that too, right?
Yeah, you could. We could do that.
Yeah.
So I used to have this. I might recreate this using the news API. One thing you could do is, or newsletters even.
Yeah.
Let me just think. The use case was that I created a separate email address that I only used to subscribe to a bunch of newsletters.
Yeah.
And because that allowed me to just forward or just watch emails. And then I just used all the incoming emails periodically, let's say every Friday or twice a week. And I would know for a fact that all the incoming emails in my inbox are actually coming from newsletters because I wasn't using that email for anything else. And then I would process that and I'm like, hey, extract all the key topics from
Mm-hmm.
this.
Mm-hmm.
What are being mentioned, what are not being mentioned. Then list newsletter 1, these are the key topics. Newsletter 2, these are the key topics. Once you get that, you do a separate completion that's like create a summary table counting how many times does a specific topic appear in this pool of newsletters. And I want to select the top 20% that appears the most. So if all the top media is covering it, it must be about something important. And then you do that filtering, and then the output is this filtered pieces of news that you already have the sources for. And then if you want to, you can refer back to the newsletters, or you can go to the news API and get sources, right? And then once you have the raw data, you just send it off to an LLM to actually craft the email for you and send it off to you. And then you have a separate email that only takes in newsletters, but you only get one email per week that's like the top digest that you need, like this one. So take a look at this one. So we're using the exact same code that we got here, which means that when I'm executing this search, this is what we got. So we got a shitload of articles here, right? Shitloads of articles. And when we run this bot, we just send it off to Gemini. Look, we sent 180,000 tokens as a prompt.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a lot. We can calculate how much did that cost.
But also compared to our original stuff, that's about 20 emails at once. You could also say it like this, right? We had like 9,000, roughly 9,000 per email in our original Indie Hackers thing. So with 180,000, it's like 20 emails.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing I like, just to stop for a second, is that so Gemini 1.5 Pro, there's a lot of stuff you can do for free. And then you're spending $1.25 per 1 million tokens. So this was like 10 cents. And if you run this once a week, that's nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, so go back here. So we did the whole thing, and then we got the daily digest.
Okay.
Right? So I can do this every day if I want to. And if I'm a bit more structured with the news search and I'm actually not returning if I'm not returning so many news pieces, I can just pre-select a bunch of media sites or newsletters. I'm not actually going to use 200,000 tokens. I'm going to use like 50,000 maybe. Then you can do this every day. And then you spend like 2 cents a day, right? So you don't even spend $1 and you have your own personalized daily digest of news that's focused on your specific area of interest without any additional text. No promotion, no ads, no fancy stuff, just the gist of it.
Yeah.
Not to mention, you can push this over to 11 Labs and generate an audio version of this.
Right. You can get an audio version. You can get all sorts of you could get it narrated to you. Of course, you could even have the entire thing not as bullet points. You can specify what kind of style you want, right? It could be super casual. You could have this thing talk to you as in whatever. It could address you personally. It could tell you a story about all of that stuff. I guess you could also add links, which would be interesting. Bullet, we could say, add a link to the most comprehensive source. So if you want to find out more, you could do that. Yeah. I think I understand that. And as a service, you would, best case, you would interview somebody, get their preferences, build this for them, and then just have it run for them. But I think where this gets a little bit tricky is, the news is already written by somebody else. That's fine. But now you have this transformation in the middle where it gets sort of like rewritten or summarized. And I think at this point, you want to have some type of, you don't want to have, but you have some kind of responsibility to figure out what are my actual instructions, what am I leaving out, right? what am I leaving out and what am I focusing on? Do I actually only want to get, like you said, the top 20% of everything that sort of like gets pushed out by every outlet, or do I want to have built like a radar that picks up on
Yeah.
things that are a little bit outside of the mainstream? Yeah, so it could get tricky. I recently had a conversation with ChatGPT, brainstorming content or things that I wanted to mention in a presentation. And it created this outline with me on while we were sort of like on the call. And then I had a pretty good outline. And then because I remembered a couple of things, I said, what were the things that I had mentioned as input that you didn't select or curate into the outline, right? And then it said, oh, we actually left out this, and this. And it was four things, three of which I actually thought we should add back into the outline. So the way LLMs also work is when they summarize, they make some decision as to what's important, essential, or salient, and what isn't.
Yeah.
And they usually don't tell you what's then no longer in it, right? What they left out. It's difficult to tell because otherwise you wouldn't get a summary if they would also tell you everything that they left out or ignored.
So let me show you something as a last thing here. So I'm just copy pasting one of the indie hackers email. And one thing that I like to write a lot about is neurosymbolic AI, right?
Yeah, tell
and
me
the
about
neural
that.
net bit, we know a lot about that now, but the symbolic reasoning part is what's missing because LLMs are missing some sort of semantic ontology, which is something I'm getting more and more into. It's like a computable, logical description of the semantic relationships in a raw text, a raw piece of text. So, for example, one of this would be one of the ways to describe semantics is with using a semantic triple. Semantic triples look like this. Let me show you 1 second. Okay, so semantic triples are like this: a subject, a predicate, and an object. Let me see if there you go. Subject, a predicate, and an object. And it's a very abstract way of thinking. It's a very sort of high level of metaphysics. It's I think the whole semantic ontology bit is a part of philosophy, but this is something that you need like there is ontology existing in computer science, but when you go into semantics, you kind of do a bit of a detour. I think back in the 80s, there were a lot of literature around semantic ontology and RDF triples and OWL, which is a web ontology language. And so going back here, what I want to do is generate a semantic ontology using RDF triples from this stack. And now I just get a raw unstructured text and I'm getting this ontology here, and it actually extracts the logical parts of the raw text for me and transform this into a mind map using mermaid syntax. So now that I have a logical description, this is computable. There are tools that are capable of processing this kind of thing. You can create knowledge graphs with it. You can pull that into Obsidian. So look at this. So now I can just copy this text and then go to mermaid syntax here, and I got a mind map. I would need to kind of redo the whole formatting here, but marketers, AI reporting, Channing tweet, early stage customer acceptance, milestones, less fussy customers. I would need to look into this a bit more to understand what am I looking at. But here's the part that I like. I go back here, and instead of generating a mind map, I'm going to request ChatGPT to say, give me 5 examples where you take some items from, take an item from this ontology and quote the actual relevant text belonging to that. So what we're going to do now is look at this. You can take a raw unstructured text and chunk it into expressions and phrases and paragraphs. that are logical. It's like Daniel Nguyen achieves MRR 15K. This is the specific text that relates to this one. And if you add up all of these, it will translate to this. And what I love about
Or
this
something similar
is
to this, right? I mean,
something logic.
When you extrapolate from
semantically, it's going to be the same.
Yeah. So you when you sort of like extrapolate from the ontology back to text, it's not going to be the same text, but it's going to say the same thing, logically speaking.
Yeah. Now, imagine you do this not to an email, but to the Iliad, right? And then you have this entity, Achilles,
right?
And you have your own Wikipedia. Basically, you can create your own knowledge graph of how different entities relate to each other inside the Iliad, because you can just shove the whole thing into Gemini and have it generate a semantic ontology of that, and you can create a knowledge graph from that. Now, why is this important? Because there are things called semantic reasoners. Semantic reasoner. So again, I'm going to show you a Wikipedia page. It's a rule engine. And that means that these semantic reasoners, there are a bunch of open source software. These can compute that ontology that I just showed you, which means that it is capable of inferring logical statements. So if I use an LLM to write a piece of content, I then take that content that I wrote, turn that into semantic ontology lists, like what I did just now, send this to the reasoner, asking it to find its place and find the sort of outliers from it in its place from the big picture. I can actually use a machine to fact check if I wrote something that can make sense as part of the Iliad, or if it's non-existent at all. Which means that I can actually employ logical reasoning using LLMs, but the reasoning engine is not the part of the LLM itself. It's communicating. And that's the neurosymbolic AI that Gary Marcus writes a lot about, that I write a lot about, that I find fascinating, is that now you can create these things using this. This technology is actually ancient compared to transformers. You use the extraction capabilities of transformers to create a set of rules, and then you use a symbolic piece of software to enforce those rules and come back to it. And I find that to be incredible, because that solves the big problem, which is one is marketed as an LLM that reasons, but it doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't reason, right? It cannot reason. But with this extension, it potentially could. So I think this is the fascinating bit.
Yeah. I think I heard some professor talk about this just recently on an interview, where he mentioned that in regards to making more progress on getting LLMs to give me a sec. And I think what resonates here with me is that I never was trying to think maybe of like writing an article about this, but I think what's underrated is using the large language models as translators. And I mean that in a broader sense, like you just showed with like creating the ontology. So not translating one language to another, but transformers in themselves are already translation machines. They tokenize everything, whether that's audio, visual, like it's multimodal by this point. But then you can translate, and you can translate into a syntax or into some kind of like language, like you just showed with ontology, and you can also translate back. And these translations are quite, they're good, right? So the LLM is really good at the translating part, which also we could use in knowledge work much more than we currently do. And then you can combine it with something that does more formal reasoning, like what you just showed.
Yeah, I think that's a rabbit hole that we should cover at another time.
Yeah, because
it's been going on for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also like my brain's fried, but but whether you want to do this with me or with somebody else, but I'd be interested. I just want to flag this, and you can, if you want to, stop the recording. But I'm curious to find out more about how deep you're going into this type of stuff in the context of the CGM project. Like how much are you dividing things up? You said, how much are you chunking all of these comments, reviews? How do you combine these
Yeah.
timelines? Because I don't know where you settle or what you think is sort of like good enough, but that's really interesting. Like, and I was even thinking on a personal level, like I'm also trying to build my own content creation machine, which is not even so much focused on that I just want to push out content, but I want to find a good way to capture what I'm talking about with people, like with you, what I'm reading, what I'm watching, and what are the core ideas? How do I see them connecting? And how do I sort of what are the new combinations or things that I sort of like want to bring together and shine some light on, right? So yeah, it's not today, but I'm curious how you do
Not
this
today.
in the content generation machine project, because I think this is where it gets
Yeah.
kind of really
I
interesting.
want to wait for a bit until the content generation machine is coming together a bit more or a bit better. And then I will also need to, there's a lot of sensitive data in there. So there's a
Sure.
lot that I cannot just outright show because
Yeah.
it's not something I'm doing for myself. It's something I'm doing for a client. But the project is coming together pretty nicely, and I'm hoping to finish that by mid-November. And once that's done, I'm going to write it up, sort of a case study of how this works, and share it with people. And I think we can do a session on that.
Mid-December, you said?
Mid-November.
November. Okay, cool. That's pretty quick. Pretty quick. Okay.
All right.